Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Wednesday night class. We're studying Parashat Miketz, the 10th Torah portion in the book of Genesis, and we are studying the holy words of Rav Leib Heyman, as well as Rav Shimshon Pincus. So, for tonight's sponsors, a big thank you to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Max and Siggy Laredo, who are sponsoring tonight's class in honor of my Hebrew birthday, which is actually tonight, the fourth candle of Hanukkah. So a big thanks to my parents who are sponsoring tonight's class. And my mom had this whole thing that she wanted me to say. I don't really remember it, but it had something to do with me bringing light into our family and community and keeping on spreading the light of Torah, B'ezrat Hashem, worldwide. So a big thanks to my parents, and hopefully we will be able to continue to spread the Torah from torch to torch, from flame to flame, B'ezrat Hashem, Yitbarach, Amen. Another sponsor for tonight's class is my son, Moshe Chaim Laredo, who is on tonight's class. He made a little bit of money, and he also made a donation to the Hollywood Torah Center. So God bless him. He wanted to do that in honor of his father's birthday. That's my birthday. So thank you, Moshe Chaim. Thanks for listening in. And may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless you, see over there, to continue to learning well in yeshiva and growing and being successful in all you do, and always remembering to give tzedakah and meiser. Really, really kol hakavod. Thank you. Okay. We are now starting the class, and tonight's class is going to be a big one, a big eye-opener. So let's just give a little bit of an introduction before we jump into Reb Leib. Speaking about Joseph and his brothers and his father, Jacob, a lot going on. So when Joseph was 17 years old, he was kidnapped by his very own brothers. Now, even though they were his half-brothers, they were still his brothers. They all associated with their father, Jacob, and they were brothers. They had their reasons. He had his reasons. Their reasons were they hated him for being the favored one, reporting always negative and derogatory things to their father about them. And he finally gets to Egypt. He gets to the house of Potiphar, and he quickly rises the ranks and he becomes the head of his household. He was in charge of Potiphar's entire estate. We're talking a slave, but Potiphar obviously sensed that this was an educated man, educated teenager, something which was very scarce back in the day. And not only was Yosef a very wise young man, he was also a very good-looking young man. And Potiphar's wife set her eyes on him and was trying to seduce him, to get him to sleep with her. And he would, at all costs, God forbid, never do such a thing. And we know that she fabricated a scenario which made Joseph look bad, and he was thrown into jail. Now, in jail, he was also rising the ranks very quickly. He became the head of all the inmates, and then came his famous interpreting of dreams. There were another two fellows, inmates, in this royal jail. It was not any type of jail. It was a royal jail, where Paro's butler, the man who would serve him wine, as well as Paro's baker, both found themselves in jail, each committing their own crime, and they both had very, very disturbing dreams, and we know the story. Joseph interprets them, and it was true. Fine. Joseph was 18 years old when he was thrown into jail, just a year after he was sold by his brothers, and finally things were starting to look good. Boom, he gets thrown into jail. Not a great thing. So when Joseph interprets the dreams, there is a lot going on in those verses. I want to share them with you because this is one thing that Reb Leib does pay attention to in a very strong way. He says, when Joseph is interpreting the dream to the baker, This is in chapter 40, verse 13. It says, Be'od sheloshet yamim. Sorry, this is for the butler, the wine steward. Be'od sheloshet yamim yisa Pharaoh et roshecha. Paro will remember you and he will restore you. Vashivecha kanecha, he'll restore you in your position. Venatata kos paro be'ado, you're going to again serve Paro his cup in his hand. Kamishpat harishon asher hayita mashkeu, the same way you used to always be his cupbearer. The next verse, this is chapter 40, verse 14. Kim zechartani. So now Joseph says, but please remember me. When everything is going to go good for you, remember me. Please do me a favor. Vizkartani el Paro, and mention me to Paro. So that you can get me out of this house, out of jail. One more verse we're going to share with you. Actually, two more at this point. The next verse, verse 15, Ki gunavti me'eretz ha'ivrim. I was stolen, I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews. Vegam polo asiti me'uma. I didn't do anything wrong to even be thrown into jail. Ki samu oti babor, for they have put me into the pit. That's very deep. Which pit's he talking about? Into this jail or really into the pit that his brothers threw him into? But either way, he was in a bind. Last thing, the end of that chapter, this is actually the last verse of last week's Torah portion. But the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, and he forgot him. That's chapter 40, verse 23. So what we see over here is that Joseph is telling the cup steward, the cupbearer, the butler, those are all the same synonyms for the same guy, Sar Mashkim. He's telling this fellow that he is going to end up being brought back to where he was previously, and not an issue for him. He is going to get out of here. But he tells him, please tell Paro what saved you over here, and remember me, please don't forget me. And then what happens? He is forgotten. So Reb Leib brings the midrash that tells us that really Yosef was supposed to only be 10 years in jail, not more. According to the Zohar, there's reasons why 10 years. 10 years in jail and no longer. However, the midrash says since Joseph mentioned twice for Paro to remember him, then he now lost his opportunity of being freed at the end of the 10 years, and he was added a subsequent 2 years. Not 10, it was rather to be 12. And this was a punishment. The Midrash says that Joseph put his trust in the butler and not relying on Hashem. This is exactly what the Midrash says. It's very famous. Rashi brings it down at the end of last week's Torah portion as well. Very important. Reb Leib says that we have an obvious question. The Talmud says you're not allowed to rely on a miracle. As a human being, we're not allowed to rely on miracles. We have to do our effort. And therefore, why is Joseph being punished? What did he do so wrong that he just told the butler, remember me, mention me to Paro? Why was that considered such a sin that Joseph was punished 2 more years in jail? I mean, every day, every moment in jail is something severe. 2 extra years? I'm sure Joseph had things to do, people to see, and he just wanted to get out, obviously. So why is it that he was punished for those mentioning to the butler to leave? So Rav Leib says that Joseph was not like any other regular or random person. Joseph indeed was on a higher level, at such a high level, at the same level of our patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And because he was on such a high level, he was also judged at a higher level, and Hashem demanded much greater and stronger amounts of belief and trust in him compared to anyone else. Now, Reb Leib goes on to prove just how high Yosef's level is. Now, of course, I could come up with extra myself. I'm sure you could think of some as well, but these were the ones that that Reb Leib actually proves, and there's a reason why he selects these. He says, firstly, at the end of last week's Torah portion, with this whole interaction between the butler and the baker speaking to Joseph, and Joseph saying that he'll be able to interpret the dream, right away Joseph says, and take a look at your screen, right away Joseph says, right over here, Vayomeru elav chalom chalanu poter enoto. This is chapter 40, verse 8. They tell him, we dreamt a dream. We don't have anyone to interpret it for us. Yosef answers, he says, don't worry. All interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dream. In essence, what Reb Leib is saying that Joseph is doing is Joseph is saying, don't worry. Tell me your dream. Because if God is the one who interprets it, tell it to me and I'll give you the interpretation. Meaning Joseph was so obvious, it was clear to him that no matter what the dream was, he'd be able to interpret it, that Hashem would actually feed him the interpretation. That's what a high level he was. But if that's not enough of a proof, Reb Leib says, and this is literally word for word what he says, is if that's not enough proof, if you'll ask and question that, he wants to give even stronger proof how connected and how high level Joseph was. He says, in this week's Torah portion, when Paro tells Joseph, take a look at your screen, chapter 41, verse 15, Vayomer Paro el Yosef, and Paro tells Joseph, Chalom chalamti ufoter enoto, I dreamt a dream, no one can interpret it, as the Midrash tells us. Paro went to all of his wise men, every single one, and they all were giving him these bogus answers, none of them that were real interpretations. Vani shamati alecha, and then Paro tells Joseph, I heard about you, lemor, saying, Tishma halom liftor oto, that all you need to do is listen to a dream and you can interpret it. No problem. Look at Paro's answer, Reb Leib says. Chapter 41, verse 16. Vayan Yosef et Paro, and Joseph replies to Paro lemor, saying, Biladai. He said, no, it's not me. It's Elokim ya'aneh shalom Paro. God is the one who's going to give the answer and give peace to Paro. Reb Leib says, Joseph is confident. No doubt in his mind. There's absolutely no hesitation that he is going to be given by God. Hashem is going to share with him the interpretation in order that he can share it with Paro. Now, Reb Leib says we see from here that Joseph was not just a prophet, a Navi. He also had Ruach HaKodesh. He had divine inspiration. And he says, you know what the truth is Pirkei Reb Eliezer, one of the Midrashim, say clearly, Yosef had Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, from a very young age until the end of his life. Almost his entire life, Yosef had divine inspiration. So he was at such a high level that of course Hashem demanded more from him. How could you put your trust in the butler when you are at the highest level ever? So in truth, Reb Leib says that being on such a high level is no easy task. On the contrary, as we all know, it's a great responsibility. And it was precisely because of that high level that Joseph was on that Hashem judged him so stringently. And for sure, this is the biggest chidush, the biggest novelty that Reb Leib says. For sure, a regular person needs to make their efforts and help themselves and do it at almost any cost, and sometimes even asking help from others and even from wicked people when there isn't anyone righteous to help you. We are not permitted, Reb Leib says, to rely on a miracle. But our patriarchs, our forefathers, were different. Every time they had an issue, the first thing they did was they turned to Hashem. They prayed to Hashem for help. That's all. We're not like that. We're not at that level. So they wouldn't take help from anyone. Do you know that Abraham didn't even take a shoelace from the king of Sodom? He said, I'm going to get everything. Hashem's going to take care of everything. We're not at that level. But Joseph was. Reb Leib says that Joseph, by putting his trust and his effort into the butler, was at his level a lack of trust in the Almighty. And because of his super high level, Ruach HaKodesh, and his prophet-like level, that is where he made a mistake. But for us, to the contrary, we need to put in our efforts and pray. It's a combination of both. For them, I guess it's just prayer, just connection. But for us, it's both. We can't leave it up to prayer only, and we can't only put our efforts. We got to do a little bit of both, or a lot of both. When I read this from him, it kind of hit me. It hit me that if I, or if any of us, anyone besides for Joseph, would have been in jail, we would have had an obligation to tell the butler, please remember me, and more than once. But Joseph, at his level, that very same deed that for us would be considered a mitzvah because that's our hishtadlut, that's our efforts, to Joseph, that very same scenario, very same deed would be considered a lack of trust and faith in the Almighty. We see a similar phenomenon by Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu, the second time he was approached to the rock, told by God, this rock's going to come forth. Water's going to come from the rock. And he hits the rock as he did the first time instead of speaking to the rock. And that's what sealed the deal for him, that he was not able to enter the land of Israel. So what? He hit a rock, an inanimate object. Who cares? Is it that bad of a thing? That bad of a deal? Who cares? Moses was judged at such a high level, so stringently by Hashem, because of his great status, and therefore that deed did not allow Moshe Rabbeinu to enter the land of Israel. That's very, very, very serious. That's because of the high level they're at. Reb Leib saying this understanding of how great Joseph was, and that the levels of Ruach HaKodesh that he had, divine inspiration and connection with Hashem, answer another very troubling question that many have with this whole episode of Joseph and his brothers and their father. Why is it that over all the years that Joseph was away from his father Jacob, knowing that his father must have been in distress, why didn't he ever once reach out to him, send a messenger, send a message, go himself, and let him know that, Dad, I'm okay, I'm surviving? Why is it that he never did any of that? So, our sages tell us, Chazal tell us, that when Joseph's brothers made the decision to sell their brother Joseph, they made a condition amongst themselves that all those who knew and partook in that deed, in that sale, in selling him like a slave, if they would ever share it with their father Jacob, that they would be excommunicated and cursed. Very, very serious. And they also included God in this condition. The 9 brothers included Hashem, that made a binyan, 10 people, and they were all included in this deed of selling their brother. Now, they never ever told their father, to the point where Yitzchak knew what happened, and he also never told his son Jacob that they really sold Joseph and he wasn't dead. Mind you, just so you know, that Joseph's brothers never lied to their father. If you look in last week's Torah portion, it's very clear. They brought the cloak, the coat, to their father with blood, and they said, we just found this. Do you recognize whose this is? And Jacob on his own came to the conclusion, oh my gosh, this is Joseph's? And he was eaten by or killed by a wild animal. They didn't say yes, they didn't say no, but they never lied. They didn't come and say, your son was killed or your son was attacked by an animal. They just brought this. Look what we found. Do you recognize whose this is? The point being that almost everyone knew what was going on except for Jacob. Jacob was the only one who was left out, to the point where Hashem obviously knew and didn't tell Jacob, and he didn't tell Jacob, and Isaac thought, listen to what Leib says. Isaac said, if Hashem's not telling my son Jacob, how can I be the one to tell Jacob? So Leib says similarly, Joseph was thinking to himself, if my grandfather, and more importantly, if Hashem knows that I'm still alive and he's not telling my father, who am I to spoil the news to my father? How can I get involved in such a deed? Hashem knows, my grandfather knows, and none of us, and no one's telling him. How can I be the one to tell him? Again, another proof that Joseph did have Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, and that's why he was judged at such a high level. So the lesson for all of us, I think, is very, very important, that we have to understand that each and every one of us are judged at our own level. That the way that I may be judged is different than you, different than your fellow, your friend, your neighbor, your family member. Every single person, Hashem has a divine calculation of each and every one of us. The Talmud speaks to us about a tinok shenishba. Tinok shenishba literally means a kidnapped child. And for the most part, many of us, most Jews today, are all kidnapped children. What does it mean, kidnapped or captured? It means that not each and every one of us grew up in a very orthodox religious framework and background. Most didn't. And even those that did, they had their issues also. It was never perfect. And because of that, Hashem does not hold that against anyone. God forbid, Hashem doesn't hold against anyone for things that they may not know, or that they never learned, or that's very, very odd and different for them because it's not their nature. Hashem judges each and every one of us specifically to our level, to our background, to our struggles, to how much effort we put into it. It's very important. He only holds us accountable to our level, to certain things, to certain ways. It's not our fault that we grew up sometimes in a very, very far-flung way. Another point, the Hasidic masters tell us that every single mitzvah we do today, nowadays, the 21st century, is worth multiples more than in previous times. The reason for that is because the temptation, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination now is so much stronger. There's so many reasons not to study Torah, not to give charity, not to eat kosher. Now, there's so many reasons too. I'm not trying to discourage. But there is so many reasons someone could come up to not doing all these things, not to doing a good deed, not to helping others, not to saying the truth, not to stealing. There's so many reasons why there are so many distractions and temptations to not do the right thing, that when we do the right thing, especially as we come closer to Mashiach every day, every year, every generation, we're closer to Mashiach. What a person does nowadays, today, by holding back from doing something inappropriate or wrong, or doing the right thing, is worth multiples of the previous generations. So we should encourage ourselves that even though we're not perfect and we're not where we would maybe like to ideally be, but we all had our own rough backgrounds and maybe not being so involved or so knowledgeable or knowing enough. And on the contrary, everything that we do really holds a lot of value. And we do have to make our hishtadlut, our efforts. We got to put our efforts in. We're not at the level of Joseph. Again, Joseph's father was Jacob. Jacob's father was Isaac. Isaac's father was Abraham. They're completely different league. They are judged at a much higher level. Moses falls into that category. We don't. And therefore we need to put effort. It's like going to the doctor. If we have full belief and trust in Hashem, why do we even go to the doctor? We're not at that level. Our display of belief and trust in God is going to the doctor, understanding that ultimately Hashem is the one who heals. We just have to make our effort, besides for prayer, actually going to the doctor, getting diagnosed, taking medication, eating properly if that's the issue, whatever it may be. But we have to put our efforts, do our hishtadlut, and at the same time understand that is really just what Hashem wants from us, but He is the one in control, and He's the one who who really chooses where we succeed and where, God forbid, we fail or fall short. But going back to where we started off, for Joseph telling the butler, remember me, go tell me to remind me, speak to me to Paro, that at his level was something that was a breach in his trust in Hashem. To us, that is what we're obligated to do. So the idea is that the very same deed done by two different people, for one person, it could be a complete mistake or sin. Another person, it could be part of their avodah, their service, and a great mitzvah to Hashem. The same is even for lesser items. For certain people, I don't want to give examples, but for certain people, certain steps that they take in the proper direction of growth, for some people that is amazing, and other people that's falling backwards, and that's not the right thing for them to do. So I guess in life, we have to, again, be very, very proud of ourselves to know that Hashem judges us at our own level, and that every good deed that we do carries a lot of weight, a lot of reward, and a lot of merit.